A single strand of hair is so thin that you can almost forget it is there. But within that very quiet journey, your body is leaving behind traces of age, genetics, hormones, nutrition, stress, and even the hidden rhythm of your own life. Welcome to Sleep by Knowledge. Tonight, we are going to enter a world that feels very familiar, yet is rarely seen through the eyes of science. Human hair. Maybe every morning, you only notice hair on your comb, on your pillow, or in the mirror. But beneath the skin of your scalp, every strand of hair begins inside a tiny hair follicle, where cells divide, the protein keratin is formed, the pigment melanin is sent into the hair shaft, and a quiet life cycle takes place. Growing, transitioning, resting, then falling out to make room for a new cycle. Hair does not grow randomly. It follows patterns, it has structure, it has its own biological rhythm, and it is that very silence that makes it so remarkable. In today's journey, you will understand why hair can be black, brown, blonde, red, or grey. Why hair can be straight, wavy, or curly. Why losing a few strands of hair each day is completely normal. And why stress, sleep, nutrition, and age can all leave their marks on your hair. And the deeper we go, the more you will realise that hair is not just about appearance. Hair is a tiny biological forest, quietly telling the story of your body. If you truly enjoy gentle scientific journeys like this, please softly like the video and subscribe to the channel. That helps this small journey reach more people. And now, relax your shoulders and join me as we step into the very fine, very light, very silent world of human hair. Hair is a part of the body, but it is not like the heart that is beating, the lungs that are breathing, or the muscles that are contracting. The part of the hair that you see outside the scalp is almost no longer living tissue in the usual sense. It has no blood vessels of its own, no nerves running through it, and it cannot heal itself the way skin can when it gets scratched. That is why, when you cut your hair, you do not feel pain. A pair of scissors can pass through thousands of strands of hair in silence, without the body sending out any signal of pain. But that does not mean hair is simple. In fact, every strand of hair is the final result of a very delicate living process taking place beneath the skin where the naked eye cannot see it. If we hold a fallen strand of hair under a lamp, it may look like nothing more than a thin, light thread, almost nothing special at all. But if we place it under a microscope, the story begins to unfold. The hair shaft is not a perfectly smooth line. It has a layered structure. The outermost layer is called the hair cuticle, made of many thin cells stacked on top of one another, like tiny scales on a tiled roof. This layer protects the inside of the hair from friction, heat, sunlight, and chemicals. When the hair cuticle is still relatively intact, hair usually reflects light better, giving it a shiny and smooth appearance. When this layer is damaged by high heat, strong bleaching, or dyeing, too much brushing and pulling, or a dry environment, hair can become rough, brittle, and less able to hold moisture. So shiny hair is not just an outward beauty. It can also be a sign that the surfaces of millions of strands of hair are reflecting light in a fairly harmonious order. Deeper inside the hair shaft is the cortex, which contains most of the hair's mass. This area is rich in keratin, a strong protein that is also found in fingernails and in the outer layer of the skin. Keratin is like the main building material of hair. It is not as soft as silk, and it is not as hard as metal. It sits somewhere in between, flexible enough to bend, strong enough to handle brushing, tying, wind, water, and thousands of movements every day. The cortex also contains melanin pigment granules, which help determine whether hair is black, brown, blonde, red, or gradually turning grey over time. Some strands of hair also have a medulla at the centre, but this layer is not always clear in every strand. Just this three-layer structure alone shows that hair is not a simple string. It is a tiny biological material made by the body with remarkable precision. But the real story does not begin with the part of the hair we can see. It begins in the hair follicle, a small structure located inside the skin. You can imagine the hair follicle as a tiny pocket that reaches down beneath the surface of the scalp. Inside that little pocket is where a strand of hair is born, pushed upward, and gradually appears on the surface. A hair follicle does not stand alone. It usually comes with a sebaceous gland, an erector pili muscle, tiny blood vessels, pigment cells, and sensory nerve fibers around the hair root area. So when we talk about a strand of hair, we're not only talking about the hair shaft lying on your shoulder, we're talking about an entire small biological unit where skin, oil glands, cells, proteins, pigments, and nerve signals all take part. At the base of the hair follicle is an area called the hair bulb. This is where cells divide rapidly to create new hair. Nearby is the dermal papilla, a small structure that contains blood vessels and important biological signals. The dermal papilla does not turn into the hair itself, but it acts like a quiet coordinator, providing nutrients and signals so the nearby cells can do their work. As new cells are created, they are gradually pushed upward. During that upward journey, they accumulate keratin, slowly lose their living activity, and become the hair shaft that we see. In a way, every strand of hair is the hardened trace of a living activity that once took place very intensely beneath the scalp. This creates a beautiful paradox. The hair we brush every day is no longer alive in the same way a skin cell is alive, yet it is born from a place that is very much alive. Hair is like a river that has passed through mountains, stones, and earth, then leaves behind curves on the water that we can see. We see the hair shaft, but we do not see the quiet work of the hair follicle. We see a few strands falling onto the comb, but we do not see other follicles still continuing to make new hair in silence. Imagine a person sitting in front of a mirror at the end of the day. The room is quiet, warm light falls gently across the table. That person runs a comb through their hair and sees a few strands left between the teeth of the comb. The first reaction may be worry, but if we look through the eyes of biology, a few fallen hairs are not necessarily a frightening sign. The human body is always renewing itself. Skin sheds tiny cells without us noticing. Fingernails grow longer very slowly. Eyelashes fall out and grow back. Hair has its own life cycle too. A strand that falls out may simply be one that has completed its stage. The important thing is not to never see hair fall out. The important thing is to understand the context, how much hair is falling, how long it has been happening, and whether it comes with obvious thinning, bald patches, itching, pain, or inflammation of the scalp. On the scalp of an adult, there are usually many hair follicles in different states. Some follicles are in a strong hair-producing phase, some are resting, some are preparing for an old strand of hair to leave. This staggered timing is very important. If all the hair follicles on the head shed hair at the same time, the hair would change suddenly by season, like the coats of some animals. But in humans, hair follicles usually do not act all at once like that. They work according to their own small schedules, creating the relative stability of our hair over days, months, and years. This is why we can lose some strands every day, while our hair still looks almost the same. Hair is also not only found on the head. Eyebrows, eyelashes, nose hairs, arm hair, leg hair, beards, and many other small areas of body hair all belong to the same broader biological idea. The body uses keratin fibers growing from follicles to protect, sense, and partly regulate its interaction with the environment. Eyebrows are not just lines on the face. They can help redirect sweat, water, or dust away from the eyes. Eyelashes do not only make the eyes look softer, they work like tiny barriers, helping the eyes become more sensitive to dust, wind, and small objects coming close. Nose hairs are not useless. They help trap some larger dust particles in the air before that air travels deeper into the respiratory tract. And the hair on the scalp, beyond its role in appearance and personal identity, can also help reduce some of the direct impact of sunlight on the scalp, while holding a thin layer of air close to the skin's surface. One interesting thing is that we only see hair as hair once it has emerged from the skin. But in biology, hair begins long before that moment. Before a strand of hair appears on the surface, cells in the hair bulb have already divided, organized themselves, received pigment, become keratinized, and been pushed upward in a steady rhythm. The body does not create hair on a whim, it creates hair through an organized process. Each day, little by little, new cells are added from below, like a thread being pushed out of an extremely tiny weaving machine. We do not hear that machine, we do not feel it running. But it still works for many years, pauses, rests, and may begin again according to its cycle. Because the hair shaft has no nerves inside it, cutting hair does not cause pain. But if someone pulls your hair hard, you feel it very clearly. The reason is that the sensation comes from the skin and the hair follicle, where nerve endings can detect the movement of the hair. When hair is pulled, the force travels down to the root area, stimulating the tissue around the follicle and the nearby nerve fibers. So hair does not hurt when it is cut, yet it can be very sensitive when it is pulled. This is a small but fascinating point, because it reminds us that hair does not live alone. It is attached to a sensory system in the skin. A light breeze moving your hair can also be felt by the skin. A strand of hair touching your forehead can make you raise your hand to brush it away. The hair shaft may not have nerves, but it still acts like a tiny lever that helps the skin sense the world. Next to the hair follicle is the sebaceous gland. This gland secretes sebum, a natural oil that helps soften and protect both the skin and the hair shaft. Without this natural layer of oil, hair could become drier, and the scalp could feel more uncomfortable. But if there is too much sebum, hair can become greasy, heavy, and more likely to collect dust. So oil on the scalp is not an absolute enemy, and it is not something where more is always better. It is part of a balancing mechanism. The body is always trying to keep the skin surface from being too dry, too easy to crack, or too defenseless against the environment. When we wash our hair, we are interfering with this oil layer. If someone washes too little, they may notice a greasy scalp, itching, or dust buildup. If someone washes too harshly or too often with the wrong product, they may notice dry hair and a tight-feeling scalp. Sometimes the science of hair begins with very ordinary things like this, not being extreme, but listening to the balance of your own body. Another small structure attached to the hair follicle is the erector pili muscle. When it's cold, when we feel emotional, or when we hear a piece of music that gives us chills, these tiny muscles can contract, making the hair stand up and creating goosebumps. In animals with thick fur, this reaction can help the fur puff up, trap more air, and support warmth. In modern humans, because body hair is no longer as thick as it is in many other mammals, this warming effect is very limited. But the reaction remains. It is like an evolutionary signature still printed on the skin. When you get goosebumps in a cold room, or when you feel moved by an old memory, your body is showing that hair and body hair are not just about appearance. They were once part of a survival mechanism in the very long history of human beings. Scalp hair is also special because it can grow much longer than eyebrows or eyelashes. This is not because scalp hair uses a completely different material, but because the growth cycle of hair follicles on the scalp usually lasts longer. Eyebrows and eyelashes have shorter growth phases, so they usually stop at a more modest length. If eyelashes grew endlessly like scalp hair, everyday life would be very inconvenient. If scalp hair grew only as short as eyebrows, human cultural history, hairstyles, rituals, personal images, and many social symbols would be very different. A small difference in the hair follicle cycle has created an entire world of human expression. When we look at someone's hair, we often judge it by eye, thick or thin, straight or curly, black or grey, shiny or rough. But from a scientific point of view, a head of hair is a very large collection of individual strands, and each strand has its own diameter, curve, pigment level, surface condition, and cycle stage. A person may feel that they are losing a lot of hair simply because their hair is long, making it easier to see on the floor. A person with short hair may lose the same number of strands, but notice it less because the strands are smaller and harder to see. A person with dark hair on a white pillow will notice fallen hair more easily than someone with light-coloured hair on a light-coloured pillow. These very simple details can affect our sense of worry. Sometimes what the eyes see is not only biology, it is also contrast, light, hair length, and the attention of the mind. What is worth saying is that hair is both strong and fragile. A single strand of hair can handle many gentle brushings, many bends in the direction of the wind, and many touches against the pillow while we sleep. But hair also has limits. Because the hair shaft has become keratinized and has no blood vessels, when the shaft is seriously damaged, the body cannot repair it the way it repairs a wound on the skin. Hair care products may make hair look smoother, reduce friction, coat the surface, and help retain moisture. But a section of the hair shaft that has been severely destroyed cannot truly come back to life. The most reliable way to remove split ends or badly broken, damaged hair is usually to cut that part away and protect the new hair better. This sounds very ordinary, but it is an important scientific truth. Hair care is not only about restoration, it is also about preventing repeated damage. Also, because the hair shaft is no longer alive, when we say hair feels healthy, We're usually talking about the physical structure of the strand, not health in the sense of blood circulation inside the hair shaft. Healthy hair usually means the cuticle is relatively intact, the shaft does not break easily, elasticity remains good, moisture is held at an appropriate level, and the scalp has no obvious problems. Hair like this does not appear through an overnight miracle. It is the result of follicles working normally, the body having a suitable nutritional foundation, the scalp being cared for properly, and the hair shaft not being overprocessed. In other words, hair retells our habits in a very slow language. The times we used too much heat, the times we pulled too hard, the seasons of too little sleep, the periods of stress, all of these may not appear immediately, but over time, they can help shape how our hair feels. However, this must be said very carefully. You cannot look at hair and accurately conclude a person's entire health condition. Hair can suggest things, but it is not a complete medical test. Dry hair may be caused by weather, shampoo products, hard water, heat, chemicals, age, or the natural characteristics of the hair itself. Hair shedding may be caused by the normal cycle, stress, hormonal changes, nutritional deficiencies, illness, medication, genetics, or many other factors. A good scientist does not rush to turn one sign into a conclusion. We observe, ask questions, look at the context, and if necessary, seek an evaluation from a medical specialist. That calmness is very important, because hair sits close to personal identity. When hair changes, people can easily become worried, but science should not make that worry bigger. Science should bring a gentle light into the things we do not yet understand. Now, let us return to the strand of hair on the comb in that quiet room. It is not a meaningless object. It is the final part of a journey. It once began beneath the skin inside a small hair follicle. It was once created by dividing cells. It once received keratin to become stronger. It once carried pigment to have its own colour. It once grew upward in very tiny amounts each day. It once touched air, light, water, fabric, fingers, and pillows. And at some point it left the scalp so light that it almost made no sound. If we look at it only with fear, we see only loss. But if we look at it through science, we see a cycle. The body is always changing, always renewing itself, always keeping a quiet rhythm behind the familiar surface. Hair is also part of human identity. We recognize a loved one from far away by their walk, their voice, and sometimes by their hair. Grey hair can remind us of time. A curly lock of hair can bring back childhood memories. A familiar part in the hair can make us recognize ourselves in the mirror after many years. Science can say that hair is keratin, hair follicles, sebaceous glands, pigment and growth cycles. But human life adds emotion, memory and familiarity to all of that. The important thing is that these two ways of seeing do not conflict. They complement each other. When we understand hair through science, we do not take away its private meaning. We simply see more clearly that this private meaning is supported by a very real biological system. And perhaps that is why hair matters so much to human beings. It sits between the body and the world. It is not as hidden as an internal organ, but it is also not completely separate from us like a decoration. It grows from the skin, carries traces of biology, then steps out into the light to become part of a person's image. It can be cut, brushed, tied, let down, covered, dyed, kept natural, or changed throughout different stages of life. But no matter how we style it, underneath it all, small hair follicles are still working according to the laws of the body. They do not care about fashion. They care about cells, signals, proteins, pigments, blood supply, and cycles. When night falls, hair rests quietly on the pillow, but the scalp is not completely silent. Some hair follicles are still in the growth phase. Some are resting. Sebaceous glands still help keep the skin surface from becoming too dry. Nerve endings around the follicles can still sense a slight movement. The body still maintains small tasks that we do not need to command. That is one of the gentlest things about biology. So many parts inside us are caring for life without needing our constant attention. We can sleep, and the body still knows how to continue. So when we call hair a biological forest on the body, that is not only a poetic image, it is also a fairly accurate scientific way to see it. A forest has many trees, many stages, many layers, and many interactions with the environment. Hair is the same. Some strands are newly growing, some strands have grown long, some are becoming weaker, some are preparing to fall out. There are oil glands that support them. There is the scalp surrounding them. There are blood vessels feeding the deeper parts. There are nerves sensing movement. There is light reflecting on the surface. There is time leaving behind change. And in that forest, each tiny strand of hair is evidence that the human body is never truly still. It is always continuing to right itself, through movements so small that we only notice them when we stop for a very long time. Once we understand that the hair shaft outside the skin is only the final part of a living process, we can go a little deeper, down to the place where a strand of hair truly begins. That place is not on the surface of the scalp. It lies beneath the skin, inside small structures called hair follicles. If the hair shaft is the part we see in the mirror, then the hair follicle is the quiet garden, where the body plants, nourishes, and renews each strand of hair over time. Each hair follicle is like a very small biological unit, but it is not alone. It has a hair-producing region, blood vessels that nourish it near the base, a natural oil gland nearby, a tiny muscle that can make the hair stand up, and chemical signals that guide it on when to grow, when to rest, and when to begin again. One very important thing to notice is that a hair follicle is not just a simple hole in the skin. Anatomically, a hair follicle is a tube-like structure that develops from the outer layer of the skin and extends down into the dermis, sometimes even deeper depending on the type of hair. For the large, thick hairs on the scalp, the follicles can sit deeper than the tiny vellus hairs on the body. This helps explain why scalp hair can grow longer, stronger, and more visibly than hair in many other areas. We see a strand of hair coming out of the skin, but beneath it is an entire small architecture, carefully arranged. It is like looking at a tree growing from the ground. We see the trunk, the branches, the leaves, and the colour, but we do not see the roots quietly holding onto the soil. At the base of the hair follicle is a swollen area called the hair bulb. This is one of the most active places in the story of hair. The cells in this region can divide very quickly when the follicle is in its growth phase. New cells created below push older cells upward. As these cells move upward, they gradually fill with keratin, lose their nuclei, lose their living activity, and become the strong hair shaft. To put it simply, hair does not grow by stretching out from the tip. Hair grows because new cells are continuously added at the root deep beneath the skin. So when we cut the ends of the hair follicle does not know it directly. Cutting hair does not hurt the root, and it does not immediately make the follicle produce hair faster. It only changes the length of the hair shaft that has already grown out. Close to the hair bulb is the dermal papilla, a small structure with a very important role. The dermal papilla can be imagined as the communication zone between the body and the hair follicle. It contains tiny blood vessels and helps send signals that regulate hair growth. Hair-producing cells cannot work in an empty space. They need energy, materials, and signals. The dermal papilla helps provide that environment. If the hair follicle is a very small thread-weaving workshop, then the dermal papilla is like the supply station right beneath it, delivering what is needed so the hair-making process can stay in rhythm. That is why, in hair research, the dermal papilla is always considered an important part of the follicle's ability to grow, rest, and regenerate. What is interesting is that a hair follicle does not simply create one strand of hair and then stop forever. It is a structure that can pass through many cycles. There is a stage when it works actively, making the hair shaft grow longer little by little. There is a stage when it transitions and reduces its activity. There is a stage when it rests. Then, under normal conditions, it can return to the growth phase. This repetition makes hair different from many other structures in the body. Hair is not like a permanent tooth that grows in and then does not renew itself in cycles. Hair is more like a garden. There is a season of growth, a season of rest, a time when old leaves leave the branch, and a time when new shoots prepare to appear. But this garden never operates completely all at once. On the scalp, hair follicles usually do not all do the same thing at the same time. Some follicles are in the growth phase, some are resting, some strands of hair have reached the end of their journey and are preparing to fall out. This lack of synchronization is exactly what protects the stable appearance of the hair. If all hair follicles rested at the same time, we would see massive shedding. If all of them grew and shed together in a clear seasonal molt, human hair would change very suddenly. But normally, the body spreads these cycles out. Thanks to that, each day some strands leave, other strands continue to grow longer, and the whole head of hair still keeps its familiar shape in the mirror. You can imagine the scalp as a quiet city at night. Each hair follicle is a small house. Some houses have their lights on, with cells working inside, creating keratin and pushing the hair upward in extremely tiny steps. Some houses have dimmed their lights and entered a time of rest. Some houses have just closed their doors to finish an old cycle, and some houses are getting ready to open again for a new cycle. From far away, that city may seem still, but if we come very close, we can see thousands of small activities happening at the same time. Hair is the same. The quiet surface hides a very patient biological rhythm beneath it. Hair follicles are also closely connected to sebaceous glands. These glands secrete sebum, a natural oil that helps protect and soften both the scalp and the hair shaft. When the amount of sebum is balanced, hair can feel softer, the scalp may feel less dry and tight, and the surface of each strand is covered by a light protective layer. But if there is too much sebum, hair can become greasy quickly, feel heavy, collect dust more easily, and make the scalp feel uncomfortable. If there is too little sebum, hair may become dry, rough, more prone to friction, and the scalp may feel tight or flake more easily. This shows that the body does not create oil on the scalp for no reason. Natural oil is not the enemy, it is part of a balancing system. The issue is not whether oil exists or not. The issue is the amount, the context, and the way we care for the scalp. When a person washes their hair, they are directly affecting this natural oil layer. Washing can remove sweat, dust, shed skin cells, styling products, and excess sebum. But if someone uses a product that is too harsh, or scrubs too aggressively, they may make the scalp drier and make the hair shaft lose some of its softness. On the other hand, if the scalp produces a lot of oil and is not cleaned properly, the hair can become greasy and the scalp can feel uncomfortable. There is no single correct hair washing frequency for everyone, because straight hair, curly hair, oily scalps, dry scalps, living environments, age, and habits are all different. From a scientific point of view, hair care should not begin with fear. It should begin with calm observation. How does your scalp respond? Where does your hair become dry? Where does it become greasy? When does it break more easily? The body often gives us data if we are slow enough to notice. Attached to the hair follicle is also a very small muscle called the erector pili muscle. When this muscle contracts, the hair can stand up, creating goosebumps. In modern humans, this reaction often appears when we are cold, when we feel strong emotion, when we hear a sound that gives us chills, or when the body reacts to a sudden sensation. In animals with thick fur, raising the hairs can help trap more air between the hairs, support warmth, or make the body look larger when threatened. In humans, because body hair is much thinner, that effect is no longer as strong as it is in many other species, but the reaction remains. Every time we get goosebumps, the body seems to open a small page of evolutionary history. Hair follicles and the structures around them do not belong only to the present. They also carry traces of a very distant past, when hair and body hair played a clearer role in survival. Because hair follicles are also connected to nerve endings in the surrounding skin, hair can become part of the sense of touch. A strand of hair moving gently in the wind is not just a mechanical movement. That movement can travel down to the skin and help the body detect a very light stimulus. This is why you can feel a strand of hair touching your cheek, or a tiny body hair vibrating in the wind. The hair shaft has no nerves inside it, but it can act like a small lever that transfers force. It pulls gently on the skin around the follicle, and the nervous system notices that change. In everyday life, this is very subtle. We rarely think about it. But these small sensations help the body understand the environment it is in, whether there is wind, movement, or something touching the skin. Hair follicles also have a special feature. The number of human hair follicles is mostly established early in life. The body does not continuously create countless new hair follicles on the adult scalp in a simple way, like grass growing across an empty field. What changes more is the activity of the follicles that are already there. Whether they produce thick or fine strands, whether they grow for a long or short time, how sensitive they are to hormones, how much they rest, and how they respond to age or the body's condition. This helps us understand why many hair care methods can only support the scalp environment and the hair shaft, but cannot freely create thousands of new hair follicles out of nothing. Once again, science helps us believe less in promises that sound too easy. The body is remarkable, but it is remarkable according to its own rules. Hair follicles across the body are not all exactly the same. Follicles on the scalp can produce long, visible strands. Eyebrow follicles create shorter hairs with a different growth cycle. Eyelash follicles also have their own limits, so they can protect the eyes without growing too long. Vellus hair follicles on the arms or cheeks create very small, soft strands that are hard to see. Beard-producing follicles in many people are strongly influenced by androgens, a group of hormones that play a role in hair growth in certain areas. So when we say hair, we are talking about a very broad concept. It may all be keratin fibers growing from follicles, but the location, length, thickness, cycle, and function can all be different. The body does not use one single formula for every place. It adjusts each region according to biological needs and hormonal signals. A very practical example is the eyebrow. Eyebrows do not grow as long as scalp hair, not because we constantly cut them in the same way, but because eyebrow follicles have a shorter growth cycle. An eyebrow hair reaches a certain length, then moves into the resting phase and falls out. Eyelashes are the same. If they had a cycle as long as scalp hair, they could interfere with vision. But thanks to their shorter cycle, they keep a suitable length and serve as a protective barrier for the eyes. On the scalp, hair follicles have a longer growth phase, so each strand can continue growing for years if it is not cut. Just one difference in how long a follicle stays active creates a very large difference between scalp hair, eyebrows, and eyelashes. When hair grows out of the skin, the hair shaft has already gone through keratinization. This means the cells that make up the hair shaft have turned into structures rich in keratin, strong but no longer alive like the original cells. So what we do to the hair shaft mainly affects its physical quality. Smooth or rough, broken or strong, shiny or dull, easy to tangle or easy to comb. But if we want to understand why hair grows sparsely, grows slowly, sheds heavily, or changes in thickness, we have to return to the hair follicle and the body underneath. That is why there is a difference between hair breakage and hair shedding. Hair breakage means the hair shaft is snapped at some point, often because of physical or chemical damage. Hair shedding means the strand has left the follicle, usually related to the biological cycle or an effect on the follicle. These two things can look similar on the floor, but their origins are different. The hair follicle is also where hair color is added. Pigment-producing cells near the hair-forming region can produce melanin, and this pigment is placed into the hair shaft as it forms. Black, brown, blonde, red, or grey hair is not simply a coat of paint applied from the outside. That colour is added during the process of creating the strand. When the hair follicle gradually produces less pigment with age or because of genetics, the new hair that grows out may be grey or white. This helps us understand one small but important point. A strand of hair that has already grown out with a certain colour usually does not change its entire colour from root to tip overnight. Natural colour change mainly happens in the new hair being created by the follicle, then becomes more visible as the hair grows longer. To the naked eye, a head of hair may look like one single mass. But from the viewpoint of hair follicles, it is a community. Each strand has its own schedule, its own age, and its own location. Some strands have just appeared above the skin. Some have been on the head for years. Some experience more friction at the ends than near the scalp. Some are in areas that receive more sunlight. Some are at the nape of the neck, where they often rub against collars or pillows. That is why, on the same head of hair, the ends are usually older, have experienced more impact, and are more likely to be dry than the hair near the roots. The hair near the scalp is usually newer, receives natural oil more easily, and is less damaged. Just by looking at the difference between the roots and the ends, we can see time recorded on a single thin strand of keratin. There is something very soothing about thinking of hair follicles. They work without needing our command. You do not have to wake up every morning and remind each follicle to create keratin, receive signals from the dermal papilla, and maintain its cycle. The body does that on its own. These processes are not absolutely perfect, because the human body is affected by age, genetics, illness, nutrition, hormones, medication, stress, and the environment. But most of the time, hair follicles still quietly maintain their rhythm. They are small, patient organs repeating a very slow task again and again, creating a strand of hair, resting, then preparing for the next cycle. When we see hair change with age, we're also seeing hair follicles change over time. Some follicles may produce finer strands, some may reduce their activity. Some areas of the scalp may be more sensitive to the hormone dihydrotestosterone in people who are prone to hereditary pattern hair loss. Some follicles continue to function well for many years, so age does not only change hair colour. Age can also change density, strand diameter, growth speed, and the overall feeling of the hair. This is not a failure of the body, it is part of biology. The body does not stay frozen in one version of itself. It always moves through stages, and hair follicles move through those stages with us. However, we need to look at hair with accuracy and calm. If a few strands falling out each day are a normal part of the cycle, then excessive shedding, patchy hair loss, rapid thinning, scalp pain, severe itching, heavy flaking or red inflammation are signs that deserve attention. Science should not frighten the listener, but it should not make everything vague either. Some changes are normal. Some changes need medical evaluation. The difference lies in the amount, how long it lasts, the pattern of hair loss, and the signs that come with it. When a scientist looks at hair, they do not only ask, is it shedding or not? They ask, what kind of shedding is it? How long has it been happening? Where is it happening? Did anything happen before it began? And has the body changed in any way? The right question is often more important than sudden worry. Let us return to the image of the nighttime city beneath the scalp. In that city there is no noise, no bright light, no movement the naked eye can see. But there is a gentle order. The small houses called hair follicles are living by their own schedules. One house receives a signal and begins creating a new strand. Another house reduces its activity and rests. A nearby sebaceous gland releases a thin layer of oil. A tiny erector peely muscle waits to respond to cold or emotion. A small blood vessel brings nutrients to the deeper region. An old strand of hair prepares to leave the skin's surface, not as a failure, but as the final section of a cycle. Hair is not just something that grows on the head. Hair is a quiet biological forest, recording age, genetics, hormones, health, care habits, and the way the body responds to time. The hair follicle is the root of that forest. It is so small that we cannot see it in the mirror, yet it determines so much of what we do see in the mirror. Hair colour begins there. Thickness begins there. The growth and shedding cycle begins there. The feeling when hair is pulled is also connected to it. The natural oil on hair also comes from nearby structures. Even the goosebumps we get when hearing an old song are partly connected to the tiny muscles around the follicles. Perhaps that is why, when we touch our hair at the end of the day, that gesture can become a very gentle moment to remember that the body is doing far more than we realise. Beneath the scalp, thousands of small structures are still keeping their rhythm. Not loudly, not hurriedly, not needing praise. They simply continue their biological work little by little. And when we understand that, we may stop seeing hair as something we must completely control and begin to see it as a living part of the body, a part that deserves to be observed, cared for, and respected with understanding. If the hair follicle is the small garden beneath the scalp, then the life cycle of hair is the season that this garden moves through. No strand of hair stays forever in one state. It is born, grows, stays with us for a while, and then leaves. After that, if the hair follicle is still healthy and the body's conditions allow it, a new cycle can begin again. This repeating rhythm is what makes hair not a fixed object, but a system that renews itself very slowly. You may see your hair in the mirror looking almost the same as it did yesterday, but beneath the scalp, each hair follicle is still moving through its own biological schedule. Some areas are growing actively, some are transitioning, some are resting, and some are letting an old strand of hair leave the body. The first and longest stage in the life cycle of hair is called anagen, the growth phase. This is when the hair follicle is most active. At the base of the follicle, cells divide continuously, get pushed upward, accumulate keratin, and gradually form the hair shaft. For scalp hair, the anagen phase can last for many years. The length of this phase is one of the important reasons that determine how long hair can grow. A person with a longer growth phase usually has the ability to grow longer hair, as long as the hair is not cut or broken. On the other hand, if the growth phase is shorter, the strand will leave the growth cycle sooner and will have a harder time reaching a very great length. So not everyone can grow hair to the same length, even if they avoid cutting it for the same amount of time. Hair does not grow from the tip. This is a very common misunderstanding. The tip of the hair is the part farthest from the follicle, the oldest part, and the part that has been exposed the most to sunlight, friction, water, heat, and chemicals. Hair gets longer because new cells are created at the root, deep inside the hair follicle, and then push the hair shaft upward. In many people, scalp hair grows at about 4/10 of an inch per month, or about 1 centimetre per month, but this number is not exactly the same for everyone. It can change depending on genetics, age, health condition, nutrition, hormones, season, and even the location on the scalp. When we hear this, we can see hair as a very slow biological calendar. Each section of hair near the root is newer, each section near the tip is older. On a single strand of hair, time has been arranged into length. After anagen comes catagen, the transition phase. This stage is much shorter than the growth phase. During this stage, the hair follicle begins to reduce its activity. The lower part of the follicle shrinks. The strand of hair stops actively growing. The connection between the hair-producing region and the deeper source of signals changes. If anagen is like spring and summer, when the garden is growing, then catagen is like a late-season afternoon, when activity begins to slow down. It is not a malfunction. It is a normal step in the cycle. The hair follicle cannot stay forever in a state of strong production. Like many other biological systems, it needs a rhythm-shifting stage to move from growth into rest. After catagen comes telogen, the resting phase. During telogen, the hair follicle is no longer actively creating a new hair shaft the way it does during anagen. The old strand of hair may still remain in the follicle for a while, like a dry leaf still holding onto a branch before it falls. This is the point many people misunderstand. When hair is in the resting phase, it does not mean it will fall out immediately at that exact moment. It may stay there for a while before leaving the scalp, so what we see on the comb today may be the result of what happened in the hair cycle earlier. The body does not always react immediately on the surface. Some changes move very slowly, then appear in front of our eyes weeks or months later. The shedding stage is often called exogen. This is when the old strand of hair leaves the follicle. That departure can happen when we brush our hair, wash it, dry it with a towel, change clothes, lie down to sleep, or simply when the strand has reached the end of its journey. In many normal cases, an old strand falls out while the hair follicle is already prepared or is preparing for a new cycle. So hair shedding does not always mean permanent hair loss. Shedding is part of renewal. Just as the skin constantly sheds old cells, hair also has old strands that leave. What we need to pay attention to is not whether hair sheds at all, but how much is shedding, how long it lasts, whether it sheds evenly or in patches, and whether it comes with any unusual signs on the scalp. A healthy person can still shed hair every day. Usually, losing a few dozen to about 100 strands of hair a day can fall within the normal range for many people. That number may sound like a lot when we see hair on the bathroom floor, but remember that the scalp has a very large number of hair strands, and those strands are not all in the same stage. If the hair is long, each fallen strand is easier to see, easier to get caught in the comb, and easier to notice on a pillow or shirt. A person with short hair may shed a similar number of strands, but because the strands are shorter and harder to see, they may notice them less. So the feeling of "I am shedding so much hair" can sometimes be exaggerated by hair length, hair colour, pillow colour, lighting in the room, or the timing of washing after several days without thorough brushing. Imagine a forest changing its leaves. When you walk along a small path under the trees and see leaves falling, you do not immediately think the whole forest is dying. You understand that part of the forest is moving through a season. Old leaves fall, organic matter returns to the soil, and the tree continues living in its own rhythm. Hair is similar. A strand leaving the scalp is not necessarily a loss. It may simply be a small leaf that has completed its season. Of course, if the whole forest suddenly loses leaves in an unusual way, with bare branches and dryness, we would need to look for a cause. But a few leaves on the path are not always a disaster. Science helps us distinguish between a normal cycle and a signal that needs closer observation. Scalp hair can stay in the anagen phase for many years, but eyebrows and eyelashes do not work the same way. They have shorter growth cycles, so they usually reach a certain length and then stop. This is why eyebrows do not grow as long as scalp hair, and eyelashes do not grow into long curtains that block the eyes. They are all keratin fibers growing from follicles, but each area of the body has a different biological schedule. Scalp hair is allowed to stay longer in the growth phase so it can grow much longer. Eyebrows need to be just enough to help protect the eyes and shape the face, but they should not grow endlessly. Eyelashes need to be sensitive enough to warn the eyes about dust and small objects, but they also need to keep the line of sight clear. The body does not design every hair follicle the same way. It adjusts each area according to its function. Age can also change the hair cycle. As people get older, some hair follicles may gradually produce finer strands, the length of the growth phase may change, the speed of growth may slow down, and hair density may decrease in some areas. This does not happen the same way for everyone. Some people keep thick hair into older age. Some people begin to notice thinning earlier because of genetics or hormones. Some people do not lose much hair, but their hair colour changes clearly. Some people do not go very grey, but their hair strands become finer. So aging is not only a story of grey hair, it is also a story of hair follicles, pigment, strand diameter, growth time, and the body's response to many internal signals. Hormones also have a strong effect on hair. One of the clearest examples is hereditary pattern hair loss, which is often related to the sensitivity of hair follicles to androgen hormones in certain areas of the scalp. In people with this tendency, some hair follicles can gradually become smaller over time, producing finer, shorter strands and making the hair look thinner. This is not simply because the hair is weak. It is a biological process with a genetic and hormonal foundation. Women after childbirth may also go through a period of increased shedding, often related to hormonal changes after pregnancy ends. During pregnancy, many strands of hair may be kept longer in the growth phase. After childbirth, many strands may move into the shedding phase within a certain period, making hair fall more noticeably during washing or brushing. For many people, this gradually improves over time, but if it lasts too long or becomes too severe, it should still be evaluated by a medical professional. Nutrition is also part of the story, but it should be discussed with balance. Hair is made mainly from the protein keratin, so the body needs enough raw materials to maintain normal hair production. Long-term lack of energy, very rapid weight loss, lack of protein, lack of iron, or deficiencies in certain micronutrients can be related to hair shedding in some people. However, this does not mean that taking a large amount of supplements will automatically make hair grow better. If the body's not deficient, excessive supplementation does not necessarily create benefits, and sometimes it can cause harm. Science does not support overly simple promises that one pill, one oil, or one natural trick can immediately change the hair follicle. Hair needs a foundation of overall health, time, and, if there is a clear problem, the right cause needs to be found. Illness and major stress can also change the hair cycle. One commonly mentioned condition is telogen effluvium, which means that more hair follicles than usual shift into the resting phase at the same time. This can happen after a physical or emotional shock such as a high fever, surgery, childbirth, major weight loss, serious illness, significant stress, or certain changes in medication and hormones. What is especially important is that hair usually does not shed heavily on the very day the event happens. Instead, a few months later, people may notice more shedding when washing, brushing, or looking down at the pillow. This delay makes it hard for many people to connect the cause. They may worry that their hair has suddenly betrayed them, when in reality the hair follicles are reflecting an event the body already went through earlier. Imagine a person going through a very heavy season, many nights of too little sleep, a long infection, or a period of mental stress stretched tight like a string. During that time, the body prioritizes energy for more essential systems. Hair follicles, although important to personal appearance, are not survival organs like the heart, brain, or lungs. Some follicles may receive a signal to shift into rest. A few months later, when everything seems to have passed, the hair begins shedding more. This can make the person feel confused because they may think the problem is happening only now. But hair is a slow record. It is not an instant mirror. It is more like a notebook that records the body's response with a delay. Not every type of hair loss is the same. Daily physiological shedding is normal. Telogen effluvium is usually diffuse shedding, with an increased number of fallen strands, and in many cases it can improve when the cause is resolved. Hereditary pattern hair loss often has a more characteristic distribution, such as around the hairline, the crown, or gradual thinning in a certain pattern. Patchy hair loss may be related to the immune system mistakenly attacking hair follicles, creating fairly clear round or oval areas of hair loss. Hair loss from long-term pulling can appear in areas where the hair is often tied, braided, or pulled tightly. Some scalp diseases can cause inflammation, scaling, pain, itching, or scarring, and these cases need early attention because they can affect hair follicles in the long term. So when we talk about hair loss, it is important not to reduce everything to one simple sentence. It is also important to distinguish hair shedding from hair breakage. When hair sheds from the follicle, you may often see a small dot or a root end that has completed its cycle at the end of the strand. When hair breaks, the strand snaps somewhere along the shaft, possibly because of heat, bleaching, dyeing, aggressive brushing, friction, chemicals, or excessive dryness. Breakage can make hair look rough, unevenly short, and easy to tangle, but the main cause lies in damage to the hair shaft, not necessarily in the follicle stopping its activity. A person can have both shedding and breakage, but these two things should be viewed differently. If we only look at hair on the floor without noticing whether the strand is long or short, whether it has a root, whether it broke in the middle or shed from the base, we may misunderstand the signal the body is sending. One question many people care about is, why does hair not grow forever? The answer lies in the limit of the anagen phase. Each hair follicle has its own cycle program. It does not produce the hair shaft endlessly. After a certain period of time, it moves into catagen, then telogen, then exogen. So the maximum length of hair depends on the growth speed and the length of the growth phase. If a person's hair grows about 0.4 of an inch per month, which is about 1 centimeter per month, and the growth phase lasts for many years, the hair can reach a significant length. If the growth phase is shorter, the hair will shed before reaching that length. This is why some people feel their hair never grows past a certain point. It is not necessarily because the hair has completely stopped growing. It may be because the cycle of each follicle causes the strand to leave before reaching the desired length. When washing their hair, many people see more shedding and become worried. But in reality, washing often causes the hairs that were already ready to shed to come out at the same time. If you have not washed or brushed thoroughly for a few days, the strands that have already reached the stage of leaving the follicle may still be caught within the hair. When you finally wash it, water, shampoo, and the movement of your hands help them slide out, making the number look larger in one session. This does not necessarily mean that washing causes hair loss in the sense of damaging the follicles. Of course, rubbing too hard, pulling wet hair too aggressively, or using products that irritate the scalp can cause breakage or discomfort. But proper cleansing itself is not the enemy of hair. It simply helps the strands that have reached the end of their cycle leave more easily. Wet hair also needs to be treated more gently. When wet, the hair shaft can be more easily stretched and damaged, especially if the hair has been chemically treated or is already dry and weak. If someone rubs too hard with a towel, drags a comb through tangled hair too quickly, or ties wet hair too tightly, the hair shaft can break. This is a story of the hair outside the body, not always a story of the follicle underneath. So when we talk about the life cycle of hair, we should also remember that a strand of hair has two parallel stories. One story happens beneath the skin, where the follicle determines growth, rest, and shedding. The other story happens outside, where the hair shaft has to face water, heat, wind, friction, combs, pillows, clothing, and our hands. There is one very subtle thing. Normal hair shedding does not make the scalp hurt. A strand of hair that has completed its cycle can leave gently. But if hair loss comes with pain, burning, severe itching, thick scaling, pus-filled bumps, red skin, or clear patches of hair loss, that is a different story. At that point, the body may be signaling inflammation, infection, a scalp disease, an autoimmune condition, or another issue that needs to be checked by a dermatologist. Science should not reassure people so much that important signs are ignored. True calm means knowing what is normal and what needs attention. With hair, a few strands on the comb can be a season of changing leaves, but a painful, red, heavily flaking scalp, or patchy hair loss, is more like an area in the forest that needs a closer look. The life cycle of hair also helps us understand why patience is so necessary. If a habit, an illness, a stressful period, or a deficiency affects the hair, recovery usually does not happen in a few days. Hair follicles need time to shift phases, create new strands, and grow those new strands long enough for us to see them. Even when the cause has been resolved, people still need many weeks or many months to see a clear change in their hair. This goes against a very human desire. We want hair to improve quickly, we want shedding to stop immediately, and we want to see results in the mirror overnight. But the biology of hair is slower than our emotions. Hair follicles do not rush. They work by the rhythm of cells, not by the rhythm of worry. Notice a new strand of hair growing near the forehead or along the part. At first, it is only a very short, light strand, almost weightless. Then, week by week, it grows a little longer. After a month, it may gain only a very small amount of length. After 6 months, it begins to be long enough to blend in with the surrounding hair. After a year, it has carried with it a meaningful stretch of life. Inside that strand is the history of sunny days, hair washes, nights of sleep, seasons of eating, and times when the body was peaceful or stressed. Hair does not tell stories with words. It tells stories through length, shine, breakage, colour, thickness, and the rhythm of shedding. And just as a forest cannot be judged by a single leaf, hair cannot be judged by a single day. Some days you may see more shedding, because you have just washed your hair after several days. Some days your hair may look rougher because the weather is dry. Some days your hair may not fall into place because the humidity in the air has changed. Some days the light makes grey hair stand out more. Some days your mood makes everything look more serious. A scientist does not rush to a conclusion from a single moment. They observe the trend. They look for repetition. They ask, how long has this lasted? Is it increasing? Does it come with other signs? And did anything happen a few months ago? When we apply that way of seeing to hair, we become less afraid of every single fallen strand and begin to understand hair within the full rhythm of its life. The life cycle of hair also teaches us a very gentle lesson. The body always renews itself by letting go. An old strand of hair does not leave because the body has abandoned us. It leaves because its cycle has reached the time to close. Behind that departure, in many cases, the follicle still has the ability to begin again. We often love what stays, but biology also needs what leaves. Skin needs to shed old cells, bone needs to remodel, blood needs to renew its cells, hair needs to shed old strands. Life is not about keeping everything unchanged forever. Life maintains order through small, continuous, quiet changes. So when you see a few strands of hair on your pillow in the morning, you may look at them differently. They are no longer only a frustrating sign. They are small notes from the body. They say that hair follicles have seasons. They say that hair has a lifespan. They say that the scalp is a community of different biological rhythms. They say that a part of you is renewing itself, even though you do not feel the process happening. Of course, if the shedding becomes excessive, lasts a long time, makes the hair clearly thinner, creates empty patches, or comes with unusual signs on the scalp, that is the time to seek professional evaluation. But in the normal flow of everyday life, some strands leaving the scalp are simply the way the body continues its quiet cycle. Hair is not just appearance. Hair is a quiet biological forest, where age, genetics, hormones, nutrition, stress, sleep and time can all leave traces. Growing, resting, shedding and starting again are not 4 separate events. They are the very slow-breathing rhythm of the hair follicle. Within that rhythm, the body holds on, lets go, regenerates, and adapts. And if we listen with understanding instead of fear, even a fallen strand of hair can become a gentle reminder that the body is still working, still adjusting, and still moving through its own seasons. After moving through the rhythm of hair growing, resting, shedding, and starting again, we can pause in front of something that is very easy to see, yet contains many layers of science. Hair colour. Hair colour is not a coat of paint sitting on the outside of a strand of hair. It is created during the very process in which the hair forms inside the follicle. As cells in the hair-forming region are pushed upward, pigment-producing cells called melanocytes send tiny pigment granules into the developing hair shaft. Those pigment granules are called melanin. Melanin is what gives hair its different shades of black, brown, blonde, red, grey or white. So when we look at a head of hair under the light, we are not just looking at a decorative colour. We are looking at the result of genetics, cellular activity, age, pigment chemistry, and even the way light touches each strand of hair. In human hair, the 2 most important groups of melanin pigment are eumelanin and pheomelanin. Eumelanin is usually connected to black and brown hair. When a person has a lot of eumelanin in their hair, the hair is usually darker. If the amount of eumelanin is lower, The hair may be lighter brown or more blonde. Pheomelanin is more connected to red and warm yellow tones. Red hair usually has a higher proportion of pheomelanin, along with a lower amount of eumelanin. But real hair colour in everyday life is not just a few separate colours on a simple colour chart. It is a very delicate mixture of pigment type, pigment amount, how the pigment is distributed inside the hair shaft, the diameter of the strand, the shine of the surface, and the surrounding light. Brown hair under the late afternoon sun may look warmer. Black hair under strong light may reveal a very slight brown tone. A grey strand under yellow light may look softer than it does under cool white light. Genetics plays a very large role in hair colour. There is no single switch that decides everything. Hair colour is the result of many genetic factors working together, influencing what kind of melanin the body makes, how much it makes, and how pigment activity is maintained inside the hair follicle. One of the genes often mentioned in this story is the MC1R gene, which is connected to whether pigment cells lean toward making eumelanin or pheomelanin. Some variants of this gene increase the chance of red-toned hair, especially when the body produces more pheomelanin compared with eumelanin. But even red hair cannot be explained with just one overly short sentence. The genetics of hair colour is much more complex, and a person's hair colour is the result of an entire network of biological signals inherited from parents and ancestors. When a child is born with light-coloured hair, and that hair gradually becomes darker with age, it is not strange. Melanin-producing activity can change during the early years of life. Many young children have pale blonde or light brown hair when they are little, but as they grow older, their hair follicles produce more eumelanin, making the hair gradually darker. This shows that hair colour is not always fixed from the very beginning of life in an unchanging form. Genetics sets the foundation, but the expression of that foundation can change with age, hormones, and the body's maturation. The hair of childhood and the hair of adulthood may belong to the same person, but they can carry two different shades of the same biological story. If we observe a growing strand of hair, the part near the root is the part that was created most recently. The part near the tip is older. This means new natural hair colour appears first near the scalp, where the hair has just been made by the follicle. If the hair follicle begins to produce less melanin, the new hair growing out may be lighter, greyer, or whiter, while the older hair farther down still keeps its original colour. This is why, when grey hair begins, we often see the change near the roots first. Hair that has already grown out of the skin with a certain amount of pigment usually does not naturally turn entirely from black to white overnight. Folk stories about someone becoming so frightened or heartbroken that their hair turns white instantly are usually exaggerated. Biologically, the colour of an already grown hair shaft does not naturally change that quickly in the usual way. Grey hair happens when newly produced hair contains less melanin than before. White hair happens when the strand has almost no pigment left. When pigment is missing, the strand is not simply dyed white from the inside. It becomes lighter, and the colour our eyes see depends greatly on how light passes through, reflects, and scatters on the strand. A head of hair with many white strands mixed among darker strands may appear grey. So, grey hair in everyday life is often a visual mixture of strands that still have pigment and strands that have little or no pigment left. Up close, each strand may look clearly different. From farther away, our eyes blend them together into a silver, grey or white area. Beneath that colour change is the story of melanocytes and melanocyte stem cells in the hair follicle. Melanocytes are the pigment-producing cells. Melanocyte stem cells help maintain the source of pigment-producing cells through hair cycles. Over time, this system can decline. Some pigment-producing cells become less active. Some stem cells may gradually run out or no longer work as effectively as before. When the hair follicle can still create the hair shaft but no longer places enough melanin into it, the new strand that grows out will be grey or white. This is a very interesting thing. Hair can keep growing, but lose its colour. The hair follicle can still do the job of creating a keratin fibre, but the pigment part of that process has changed. So grey hair does not mean the hair is more dead than black hair. Every hair shaft, once it grows out of the skin, has already become keratinized. Grey hair simply shows that the pigment-producing process inside the follicle has decreased. Age is a very common cause of grey hair. As the years pass, the body accumulates changes in cells, tissues, and regulatory systems. Hair follicles are part of that timeline too. Some people go grey quite early. Some people do not have much grey hair until later in life. Some people first turn grey at the temples. Some people grey more evenly. Some grey hair becomes bright white. Some hair stays mixed with grey for a very long time. These differences are not only about hair care. Genetics plays a major role. If many people in a family go grey early, one person in that family may also have a higher chance of going grey early. But genetics is not the only factor. Certain health conditions, specific nutritional deficiencies, smoking, oxidative stress, and environmental factors have also been studied in connection with premature greying. However, for most people, hair turning grey with age is still a natural biological process. The important thing is that grey hair should not be seen as a flaw in the body. Grey hair is a sign of biological time. It shows that the pigment system inside the follicle has passed through many cycles and is changing. When the first grey strand appears under the bathroom light, many people may feel startled. They lean closer to the mirror, gently separate the hair with their fingers, and find a thin silver thread among the familiar darker strands. That moment may make someone think about age, about their parents, about the years that have passed. But if we look with gentle science, that strand is not a frightening warning. It is a small mark of time, evidence that the body has lived, changed, and moved through many seasons. Stress and grey hair is a topic that is often overstated. It needs to be discussed accurately. Severe stress can affect the body in many ways, and research suggests that stress may be connected to changes in the pigment cell system of hair. Some animal studies show that the sympathetic nervous system and stress signals may reduce the supply of melanocyte stem cells, which can contribute to hair losing pigment. Some human studies also suggest that, in certain cases, changes in hair colour may be connected to periods of stress, and that some strands may show a degree of recovery when stress decreases. But that does not mean one anxious night will turn an entire head of hair white instantly. The body is more complex than that. Hair grows from the follicle over time, and the colour of the hair is determined when the strand is being created. So if stress has an effect, it usually appears in the new hair that grows afterward, not as an instant transformation across the entire hair shaft that already exists. It is also important to distinguish between grey hair caused by reduced pigment and hair shedding caused by stress. A physical or emotional shock can cause many follicles to move into the resting phase, leading to diffuse shedding a few months later. That is a different mechanism from greying. Both can be related to stress in certain contexts, but one mainly involves a change in the growth, rest, and shedding cycle, while the other involves a change in the pigment system inside the follicle. When we group everything into the sentence, "stress ruins hair," we lose accuracy. A scientist separates the phenomena. What is hair shedding? What is greying? What is breakage? What is thinning? And what causes may affect each one. This distinction helps the listener feel less confused and understand the body more clearly. Light also plays an important role in how we perceive hair colour. A black strand of hair absorbs more light, but it can still reflect light from the surface, creating shine. Blonde or light-coloured hair reflects and allows light to pass through in a different way, so it can look brighter in the sun. Red hair has a special warmth because melanin creates a tone that the human eye recognises very clearly. Grey or white hair lacks pigment, so light scattering and reflection make it look brighter. This is why the same head of hair can look different in the bathroom, outdoors, under late afternoon sunlight, or under white lighting. Hair colour does not exist only inside the strand. It also appears in the meeting between pigment, the surface of the hair, and light. The shinier a strand of hair is, the more evenly it reflects light, and the deeper and more vivid the hair colour can appear. When the outer cuticle of the hair lies relatively flat, the surface of the strand reflects light better. When the outer layer lifts and becomes rough because of damage, bleaching, dyeing, heat, or friction, light scatters more chaotically, and the hair may look dull, faded, dry, or lighter, even if the pigment inside has not changed much. So when dyed or bleached hair becomes damaged, the issue is not only that the chemical colour is faded. The surface structure of the hair shaft has also changed, making light no longer glide across it softly. The science of hair colour is therefore not only pigment chemistry, it is also the physics of light on a very small surface. Dyed hair gives us a clearer example of the difference between natural colour and colour changed from the outside. Natural hair colour is placed into the hair shaft as the hair forms inside the follicle. Hair dyeing, on the other hand, uses chemicals to change the colour of a hair shaft that has already grown out. Some dyes coat the surface or partly enter the hair shaft. Hair bleaching uses a chemical process to reduce the natural pigment in the strand, often making the hair lighter, but it can also weaken the hair shaft if the treatment is strong or repeated many times. Because the hair shaft that has already grown out has no blood vessels and cannot repair itself like skin, serious chemical damage is something to prevent rather than something we should expect the body to fully repair on its own. This is why even the most beautiful hair colour still needs to come with respect for the real structure of the strand. Hair colour is also connected to human evolution and adaptation to the environment, but this needs to be discussed carefully and without oversimplifying. Melanin helps absorb and disperse some ultraviolet rays, so darker pigment in skin and hair is connected to protection against sunlight. However, hair colour cannot be explained by climate alone. Human genetic history, natural selection, sexual selection, migration, population mixing, and random variation all contribute to the diversity of hair colours around the world. Black hair is very common in many regions, brown hair appears in many shades, natural blonde hair is less common. Natural red hair is even rarer, and is often connected to genetic variants that affect how the body produces pheomelanin. Each hair colour is a small branch in the long history of humankind. But in personal life, hair colour is not only biology, it is also memory. A person may remember the colour of their mother's hair when she was young, then years later see that hair gradually turn grey. Someone may keep an old photograph where their own hair looks darker, thicker, or brighter in the sunlight. Another person may watch their child's hair change from pale blonde in early childhood to brown as they grow up. These changes happen so slowly that we barely notice them day by day, but when we look back after many years, we realise the body has travelled a long way. Hair is one of the places where time leaves its most visible traces. It does not hide the years, it brings the years out into the light. In culture, grey hair is often connected with age, experience, memory, family roles, and sometimes calmness. But each person's feelings about grey hair are different. Some people love their grey hair as a sign of dignity. Some people want to dye it back to its old colour because they feel more like themselves when their hair is darker. Some people do not care much. Some people worry because grey hair comes early. Science does not force anyone to love or hate grey hair. Science only helps us understand that grey hair is not a moral weakness, not a personal failure, and not always a sign of illness. In many cases, it is part of the normal aging process. From a biological point of view, the gentlest thing is that grey hair shows the body knows how to change. The hair follicle does not freeze at age 20, 30 or 40. It travels with us. It responds to time. It carries part of the family's genetics. It is influenced by hormones. It may be affected by stress, illness, or the environment. It creates pigment while it still can, then reduces pigment as that system gradually weakens. A grey strand is not weaker simply because it is grey, but in some people it may feel drier or coarser because of changes in hair structure, the amount of natural oil, age, and hair care habits. That feeling does not come from whiteness alone, but from the whole biological context of hair as the body gets older. One thing many people do not notice is that hair does not turn grey across the entire head all at once. Many people first notice grey at the temples, or a few scattered strands on the crown, or one small area that appears earlier than others. This shows that follicles in different areas are not completely the same in how quickly they lose pigment. Just as the growth and shedding cycle is not synchronized, the greying process is not necessarily synchronized either. Each hair follicle has its own history, its own level of activity, its own source of pigment cells, and its own sensitivity to time. So the hair is like a very soft map of personal biology. Some areas keep their colour longer, some areas brighten first. One strand may remain black beside another that has already turned white. On the same scalp, many small ages of hair follicles are existing together. If a strand of hair could speak, it probably would not tell its story in grand sentences. It would speak very softly. It would say that at its root, melanin was once placed into it steadily. It would say that inside its shaft there is eumelanin creating dark tones, or pheomelanin creating warm tones. It would say that morning light makes it look different from nighttime lamplight. It would say that its tip is many months or years older than the hair near the root. And if it is a grey strand, it would say that the follicle that created it has entered a new state, where pigment is no longer being sent into it as before. No bell rings, no loud event happens. There's only a very small change inside the hair follicle, and then a thin silver thread appears on someone's head. When we understand this, we can look at hair colour with more calm. Black hair is not only black, it is a sign of abundant eumelanin. Brown hair is another level of pigment mixture. Blonde hair usually has less eumelanin. Red hair is strongly connected to pheomelanin. Grey hair is when melanin decreases. White hair is when pigment is almost absent. These colours do not belong only to beauty. They belong to cells, genes, hair follicle cycles, light, and age. Every colour is a form of story. No colour is more correct than another. No colour makes a person more valuable. They are simply different ways the body writes its surface. Perhaps that is why hair colour is one of the details that can move us so easily. It is deeply scientific and deeply personal at the same time. We can analyse melanin, eumelanin, pheomelanin, melanocytes, genes, and light. But in the end, a first grey strand can still make us pause a little longer in front of the mirror. A loved one's hair changing colour can still make us feel time touching our family. A child's hair growing darker with age can still remind us that the body's always maturing in silence. Science does not take away that feeling. Science makes the feeling deeper, because we know that behind a hair colour is a living system that has been working for a very long time. Hair is not just something that grows on the head. Hair is a quiet biological forest, where genetics decides the foundation of colour, where hair follicles create pigment, where light makes that colour appear, where age gradually reduces pigment, and where changes in the body can leave very subtle traces. Hair colour is the memory of cells brought out to the surface. It is one way the body says, I've lived through time, I've changed, and I'm still continuing. And if tonight, under a gentle light, you notice one small grey strand, maybe you will not rush to see it as something frightening. Maybe you will see it as a thin thread of light, a sign that the body has passed through many seasons and is still quietly writing its story. Some people have straight hair, with strands falling down like soft, long lines. Some people have wavy hair, like the surface of water when a light breeze passes over it. Some people have hair that curls into loose loops. Some people have tightly curled hair, coiling into small, lasting curves. These shapes are not random, and they are not only caused by how we brush, wash, or sleep. They begin beneath the skin, with the shape of the hair follicle, the way the cells that create the hair shaft are arranged, the keratin structure inside the strand, and the way the hair interacts with natural oil, humidity, temperature, and time. To the naked eye, a strand of hair may look like only a thin line, but if we cut across that strand and look at it under a microscope, we can see that its cross-sectional shape can vary. Some strands have a cross-section that is closer to round. These strands usually tend to grow straighter, because the forces inside the hair shaft are distributed more evenly around the strand's axis. Some strands have a more oval or flattened cross-section. When the cross-section is not evenly round, the material inside the strand is not distributed with perfect symmetry, and the strand bends more easily. This is one important reason hair can be straight, wavy, loosely curly, or tightly curly. The shape we see on the shoulders, on the comb, or in the mirror is actually guided by a very small structure inside the skin. Hair follicles can also be curved or straight. If the hair follicle is relatively straight, the hair usually comes out of the skin in a line with less curve. If the follicle is curved, the hair forms along a more curved path, and the hair shaft tends to keep that curve as it grows outward. You can imagine the hair follicle as a very tiny mould. Keratin material is created inside that mould, then moves up to the surface. If the mould is straight and the strand's cross-section is more round, the hair tends to be straight. If the mould is curved and the strand's cross-section is flatter, the hair tends to be curly. This does not mean that only one factor decides everything, but it shows that hair shape is not without reason. It is the result of anatomy, cell biology, and very small-scale physics happening inside each hair follicle. Inside the hair shaft, keratin is not arranged randomly. Keratin protein fibers are organized into orderly structures, along with chemical bonds that help give hair its strength and shape. One important type of bond is the disulfide bond between sulfur-containing molecules and keratin. These bonds help maintain the long-lasting shape of the hair. Naturally curly hair has a different internal arrangement and force distribution than straight hair. When people chemically perm their hair, some of the bonds inside the hair are broken and then reformed into a new shape. When people chemically straighten their hair, the process also affects the bond structure inside the hair shaft to make the hair straighter. This shows that hair shape is not only an outward appearance, it is a chemical and physical state of a keratin fiber. Humidity in the air can also change hair shape temporarily. Many people notice that their hair becomes frizzier on humid days, or that straight hair no longer lies as neatly as it does when the air is dry. The reason is that water can affect weaker bonds in the hair, especially hydrogen bonds. These bonds can change when hair gets wet, when it dries again, or when the air is very humid. So the same head of hair can look different on a cold, dry day and on a hot, humid day. Hair is not an unmoving plastic string. It is a biological material that reacts to its environment. It absorbs some water, changes its volume, changes how the strands lie next to one another, and then makes the hair look smoother, frizzier, heavier, or lighter depending on the conditions. Straight hair often allows sebum from the scalp to move down the hair shaft more easily. Sebum is the natural oil released by sebaceous glands near the hair follicle. When the strand is relatively straight, this oil can slide along the length of the hair more easily, making hair more likely to look shiny, but also more likely to become greasy for some people. Curly hair, especially tightly curled hair, has more curves and bends. Natural oil has a harder time travelling along the hair shaft, so the ends of curly hair are often more likely to become dry, more prone to friction, and in need of gentler care. This does not mean curly hair is weaker in the sense of being less valuable. It is simply a different physical mechanism. Oil moves more easily along a straight road than along a winding road. We can compare hair types to rivers. Some rivers flow straight across a plain, with long and quiet water. Some rivers bend through valleys, changing direction softly with the land. Some rivers coil into small turns, carrying more movement within the same distance. They are all water. No river is more noble than another. They simply travel through different paths. Hair is the same. Straight hair, wavy hair, curly hair, and tightly curled hair are all made of keratin. All grow from follicles, all have life cycles, and all respond to age, hormones, light, humidity, and care habits. The differences lie in follicle shape, strand cross-section, internal structure, and the way each strand interacts with the environment. When we talk about thick or thin hair, we also need to make a very clear distinction. Many people use the phrase thick hair in a general way, but scientifically, there are at least two different meanings. One is the diameter of each individual hair strand. A person with larger strands may be described as having coarse hair or thick individual strands. The other is hair density, meaning the number of hair strands in a certain area of the scalp. A person with fine strands but a very large number of them can still have hair that looks full. A person with coarse strands but lower density may not look extremely thick-haired. So when we evaluate hair, we should not rely on one simple word. The fullness of hair is a combination of individual strand diameter, number of strands, curl pattern, volume, hair colour, shine, and even the haircut or styling. Curly hair can often look thicker because its curved shape creates more space between the strands. Straight hair may lie closer to the scalp, so even if the density is not low, it can still look thinner in certain haircuts or lighting. Light-coloured hair can make the scalp more visible under strong light. Dark hair against lighter skin can also make the part lines stand out more. Long, heavy hair can pull downward, making the roots look less lifted. Short hair or a suitable layered cut can create the impression of more volume. This reminds us that the image of hair in the mirror does not depend only on internal biology. It also depends on light, gravity, hairstyle, length, and how the strands lie next to one another. Hair strand diameter also differs from person to person, and even between different areas of the same head. Some areas may have finer strands. As age increases, some hair follicles may produce smaller strands than before, making the hair feel softer, thinner, or less full. In hereditary pattern hair loss, follicles in sensitive areas can gradually shrink, producing shorter and finer strands. This process does not happen in the same way across the entire scalp. That is why some people notice thinning at the crown, some notice changes at the hairline, and some notice a wider part. Once again, hair is a slow map of the body. It records differences between individual follicles, scalp areas, and stages of age. Hormones can change hair in very noticeable ways. In some people, puberty can make hair oilier, thicker in certain areas, or different in texture. After childbirth, hormonal changes can make hair shed more for a while, because many follicles shift into the resting phase and shed closer together. During menopause, hormonal changes can also affect hair thickness, hair density, scalp condition, and the way the strands feel. Some people notice that their hair becomes drier, finer, or different in texture compared with when they were younger. This does not mean the hair has betrayed the body. It simply shows that hair follicles are part of a larger endocrine system. When internal signals change, hair can change along with them. Serious illness, high fever, surgery, rapid weight loss, nutritional deficiencies, or long-term stress can change the way hair feels and the number of strands that shed. But we also need to remember that hair changes often come with a delay. A stressful period or an illness may not show up in the hair on that same day. It may appear a few months later when affected follicles enter the shedding phase. This makes hair feel like a diary written slowly. You cannot read today's page and know exactly everything that happened this morning. Sometimes today's page is telling the story of what the body went through weeks earlier. So when hair becomes thinner or sheds more, the scientific question is not only, what did I do to my hair today? It is also, what has my body gone through over the past few months? Hair texture can also change over time. Some people have straighter hair as children, then more wavy hair as they grow up. Some people notice curlier or drier hair after hormonal changes. Some people notice that when they have more grey hair, their hair feels different, sometimes coarser or harder to style. These changes do not always have one single cause. They can come from changes in strand diameter, sebaceous glands, pigment, follicle shape, accumulated damage on the hair shaft, and care habits. Because hair grows slowly, the change is often slow too. We may not notice it day by day, but after 1 year, 2 years, or 10 years, the hair may no longer look exactly like the hair in an old photograph. One point needs to be said very clearly. No hair type is better than another in terms of human value. Straight hair is not biologically more neat. Curly hair is not difficult in a negative sense. Fine hair is not lesser than coarse hair. Thick hair is not automatically healthier than thin hair. Each hair type simply has different physical characteristics, so it needs different care. Straight hair may show oil more easily, so some people may need to cleanse it more often. Curly hair may become drier at the ends, so some people may need to reduce friction, maintain moisture better, and avoid pulling hard when the hair is tangled. Fine hair can become weighed down if too much product is used. Coarse hair may need more time to absorb water or dry completely. These differences are not for ranking one type above another. They are for understanding the real needs of the hair. When brushing hair, hair shape matters a great deal. Straight hair is often easier for a comb to pass through when it is not tangled. Curly hair has a winding structure, so when it's brushed too harshly while dry, the strands can separate, lose their curl clumps, become frizzier, and break more easily. That is why many people with curly hair find that their hair behaves better when it is gently detangled while damp, with a product that adds slip and without pulling hard from roots to ends right away. This is not a vague beauty trick. It is simple hair physics. A curve experiences force differently when it is suddenly pulled straight. When thousands of curved strands overlap, friction increases, and the way we touch the hair needs to be softer. Heat also affects hair shape. Blow dryers, flat irons, and curling irons can temporarily or more permanently change how strands lie. Heat and water can change weaker bonds in the hair, creating a temporary style. Chemicals can reach deeper into the internal bonds, creating a longer lasting style, but they can also weaken the hair if they are too strong or used too often. Because the hair shaft does not heal itself like skin, heat and chemical damage should be understood as accumulated wear. One treatment may not create a major change, but repeated treatments over time can lift the outer layer of the hair, reduce the shaft's elasticity, and make it more likely to break and become dry. The curlier, longer, and older the hair is at the ends, the more gently it should be handled, because the ends have already gone through many months or years of exposure to the environment. Hair shape also affects how hair reflects light. Straight hair can reflect light in longer shiny bands, because many strands lie in the same direction. Curly hair reflects light at many different angles, so shine may appear as smaller points or areas. This does not mean curly hair is naturally less shiny. It only reflects light differently. Healthy curly hair can be beautiful and full of life, but light does not travel across it the same way it travels across straight hair. When we understand this, we become less likely to force one single standard of smooth shine onto every hair type. Each shape has its own way of interacting with light, and its beauty appears in its own way. Hair density is also not distributed exactly the same way in every person. The crown, temples, nape, and hairline can differ in number of strands, strand thickness, hormone sensitivity, and the way hair grows out of the skin. When a person notices that their part looks wider, it may be because of light, the way the hair is parted, oily hair, wet hair, or it may be because hair density has decreased. We need to observe over time instead of judging from only one day. If the part keeps getting wider, the hair becomes clearly thinner, or shedding lasts a long time, that is the time to seek a professional evaluation. But if the hair has just been washed and is not dry yet, or oil makes the hair stick together in sections, the scalp may look more visible than usual without it being a true change in the follicles. Science always asks for context. There is a very ordinary truth. The way we sleep can also make hair look different in the morning, but it does not change the shape of the hair follicle. Sleeping on one side, friction against a pillow, going to sleep with damp hair or tying hair too tightly can create bends, frizz, tangles, or temporary disorder. These marks usually belong to the hair shaft outside the body. They are different from the natural shape determined by the follicle, so messy hair in the morning does not mean the hair has changed its nature. It only shows that the hair shaft is a flexible material that can be affected by water, pressure, and friction. After being dampened, gently dried, brushed properly, or allowed to air dry, hair can return closer to its familiar shape. When grey hair appears, the shape and feeling of the hair can sometimes change too. Some people feel that grey hair is stiffer or stands out more. Part of that feeling may come from the fact that grey strands lack pigment and reflect more light, making them easier to see. Another part may be connected to changes in the hair follicle, strand diameter, sebaceous glands, and age. We should not conclude that every grey strand is coarser or weaker in the same way, but we can say that when hair loses pigment and the body gets older, the overall feeling of the hair may change. This once again shows that hair colour, hair shape, and hair age are not separate from one another. They belong to the same moving biological system. Hair is also affected by the environment we live in. Dry air can make hair lose moisture faster. Humid air can make hair swell and frizz more. Sunlight can oxidize hair, causing natural hair colour or dyed hair to change over time. Seawater, chlorine in swimming pools, strong wind, dust, and friction from hats or towels can also affect the hair shaft. These factors usually do not immediately change the shape of the follicle deep under the skin, but they do change the part of the hair that has already grown out. Because the ends of the hair are the oldest part, they accumulate the most effects. A strand of shoulder-length hair may have lived outside the body for years. It has passed through many sunny seasons, many washes, many nights of sleep, many brushings, and many waves of weather. So the ends usually need gentler care than the newly grown hair near the roots. What makes hair special is that it belongs both to internal biology and to the outside world. Its natural shape begins in the hair follicle, but the way it appears to our eyes also depends on the environment, habits, light, and care. A person with naturally curly hair may see their hair look very different after using heat. A person with straight hair may notice a slight wave when humidity is high. A person with fine hair may see more volume after cutting it shorter. A person with reduced hair density may notice the scalp more clearly when the hair is greasy. These things do not contradict one another. They show that hair is a dynamic system, not a dead object standing still. Perhaps the gentlest way to see it is not to force every head of hair to behave the same way. A straight river does not need to bend to be considered beautiful. A winding river does not need to become straight to prove order. Each river follows its own terrain. Hair also follows its biological terrain. Hair follicles, keratin, strand cross-section, chemical bonds, natural oil, humidity, age, and hormones. When we understand that terrain, we care for hair better. We do not pull curly hair as if it was straight hair. We do not weigh down fine hair with too many products. We do not immediately see oily hair as dirty, but look at the sebaceous glands and the need for cleansing. We do not see dry hair as a personal failure, but understand the path of oil, curl pattern, and environment. Hair is not just something that grows on the head. It is a quiet biological forest. where every strand has its own path, its own curve, its own diameter, its own age, and its own way of responding to the world. Straight hair, wavy hair, curly hair, and tightly curled hair are all different expressions of the same body that knows how to create keratin, use hair follicles as living molds, send natural oil along the strand, and change with hormones and time. If hair colour is the way the body writes with pigment, then hair shape is the way the body writes with curves, and inside those curves there are genetics, physics, chemistry, age, habits, and the very soft privacy of each human being. When night falls, hair rests on the pillow in its own shape. Some strands lie straight, some bend gently, some coil, some lift from the surface of the fabric like small drawn lines. Whatever the shape, it was still born from hair follicles working in silence. It is still a sign that the body has been, and continues to be, creating itself little by little. And if we place a hand on the hair very gently, we can feel something very simple. The body does not need to look like anyone else to be remarkable. Inside one straight strand, one curly strand, one fine strand, or one thick strand, there is already enough science to remind us that difference is not a flaw. Difference is the way biology tells stories through shape. After seeing hair as straight lines, waves, and curves written by the body in keratin, we can move one layer deeper. Hair does not only have shape, hair can also reflect part of the body's condition, not in a mystical way, and not like a perfect diagnostic machine, but in a very biological way. Hair depends on hair follicles, and hair follicles depend on blood supply, hormones, nutrition, inflammation, scalp health, and the overall rhythm of life. When the body changes, hair sometimes changes too. But hair usually does not speak right away. It speaks slowly. It sends signals through increased shedding, finer strands, dryness, an itchy scalp, broken ends, or a part line that seems wider over many months. The first thing to remember is that hair can suggest something, but it should not be used to diagnose illness on your own. Dry hair does not automatically mean the body is lacking nutrients. A few days of heavier shedding does not automatically mean hair follicles are being lost forever. A slightly itchy area of the scalp does not automatically mean there is a serious disease. Hair is like a small letter from the body, but that letter needs to be read with context. We need to ask, when did the hair change begin? Did it change quickly or slowly? Is the shedding all over the scalp or only in one area? Is there pain or itching? Is the scalp red or flaky? And has there recently been a high fever, surgery, childbirth, major weight loss, severe stress, a change in medication, or a hormonal change? A scientist does not look at one strand of hair and rush to a conclusion. They look at the whole story around it. Under normal conditions, a person can still shed a certain amount of hair every day. This belongs to the natural cycle of hair. But when the amount of shedding clearly increases, lasts for a long time, or makes the hair noticeably thinner, we need to observe more carefully. Hair shedding can be related to many causes: genetics, age, hormones, stress, nutritional deficiencies, illness, medication, scalp conditions, or mechanical stress on the hair. Because there are so many possibilities, guessing from a single sign is usually not reliable. Two people may both see hair on the pillow, but the causes may be different. One person may simply be going through temporary shedding after a stressful period. Another may have hereditary pattern hair loss. Someone else may have scalp inflammation, low iron, a thyroid disorder, or a reaction to medication. It may all be hair shedding, but the mechanisms underneath are not always the same. Protein is an important part of the story because the hair shaft is made mostly of keratin, a strong protein. The body needs enough raw material to create new hair. If a person eats too little energy, lacks protein for a long time, or loses weight too quickly, the body may prioritize vital organs over hair. Hair is important to personal appearance, but to the body, hair is not an essential organ like the brain, heart, lungs, or liver. When biological resources are under strain, some hair follicles may shift into a resting state, and the hair may shed more afterward. This does not mean eating a huge amount of protein will make hair grow thick like magic. It only means that hair needs a balanced nutritional foundation so the follicles can work normally. Iron and certain micronutrients can also be related to hair in some people. Iron deficiency, especially when it comes with anemia or low iron stores, can contribute to hair shedding. Some thyroid disorders can also change hair, because thyroid hormones are involved in many metabolic processes throughout the body. When the thyroid is underactive or overactive, hair may become thinner, drier, more likely to shed, or different in texture. But the important point is that you should not take iron, hormones, or supplements on your own just because you notice hair shedding. If the body's not deficient, taking too much may not help and can sometimes cause harm. The better approach is to investigate the cause medically when hair shedding is heavy, long-lasting, or accompanied by unusual signs. Stress is also a common factor, but it needs to be explained accurately. Mild stress on a single day does not necessarily make hair fall out right away. But a period of major stress, serious illness, high fever, surgery, childbirth, major weight loss, or physical shock can cause more hair follicles than usual to move into the resting phase. This condition is often called telogen effluvium. What is especially important is that the hair usually does not shed immediately when the event happens. It may shed more a few months later. So a person who has just gone through a difficult season may think they are already better, then suddenly notice more hair on the pillow, in the shower, or on the comb. In reality, the hair at that moment may be telling the story of what the body went through earlier. Imagine a person going through a very exhausting season. Maybe that person is caring for a seriously ill loved one, sleeping poorly for many nights, eating irregularly, or going through a major emotional event. During those days, the hair may still rest quietly on the head, drawing no attention. But beneath the scalp, some follicles may have already received the signal that the body is under stress. They do not fall out immediately, they shift phases. Then, a few months later, when that person has returned to a more normal rhythm of life, the hair begins to leave the scalp in larger amounts. Looking at the hair in their hand, the person may worry that something serious is happening right now. But sometimes, hair is simply a delayed letter. The body sent it from a previous season. Postpartum shedding is also a very clear example of how hormones and the hair cycle are connected. During pregnancy, hormonal changes can keep many strands of hair in the growth phase for longer. After birth, hormones shift back, and many strands may move into the shedding phase during a certain period. That is why many people notice heavier shedding a few months after giving birth. This can be frightening, especially when the body is tired, sleep is limited, and a baby needs care. But in many cases this is temporary, and the hair can gradually improve. However, if the shedding is very heavy, lasts too long, comes with severe fatigue, dizziness, scalp abnormalities, or other symptoms, it should still be checked by a doctor to rule out anemia, thyroid disorders, or other health issues. Medication can also affect hair. Some medicines used to treat illness can cause hair shedding or change the hair cycle in some people. Chemotherapy for cancer treatment is the strongest example, because these drugs can affect rapidly dividing cells, including hair-producing cells. Some other medications related to the heart, blood pressure, depression, arthritis, gout, or hormones can also have hair shedding as a side effect in some cases. But people should not stop taking medication on their own just because of hair shedding. Medications are used for medical reasons. If you suspect a medication is related to hair changes, the safest approach is to talk with a doctor to weigh the benefits, risks, and possible alternatives if needed. The scalp is also part of hair health. Many people care very carefully for the hair shaft but forget the scalp. In reality, hair follicles sit inside the scalp, sebaceous glands are there, microorganisms live there, skin cells shed there, and inflammation can happen there. Mild dandruff can bother people because white flakes fall onto clothing. Seborrheic dermatitis can make the scalp red, oily, flaky, and itchy. Some other scalp diseases can cause pain, inflammation, pus-filled bumps, thick scaling, or patchy hair loss. When the scalp is not healthy, hair can also be affected indirectly. So hair care is not only about making the hair shaft shinier. It is also about keeping the scalp properly clean, non-irritated, not overly pulled, and not ignoring signs of inflammation. There is a very important difference between damaged hair and hair shedding from the follicle. Hair damage from heat, bleaching, dyeing, straightening, perming, or overly aggressive brushing and pulling is usually a problem of the hair shaft. The shaft loses strength, the outer layer lifts, the ends split, and the strand breaks in the middle. When we look down at the floor, broken hair can make us think it is shedding. But breakage does not necessarily mean the hair follicle has stopped working. It means the hair shaft has been exposed to too much force, too much heat, or too many chemicals. Hair shedding from the follicle is a different story. The strand leaves the root because of the cycle, or because something is affecting the follicle. These two things can happen together, but they need to be distinguished so we do not care for the hair in the wrong direction. For example, if someone bleaches their hair many times, uses a high-heat flat iron every day, and then notices short uneven pieces, split ends, and strands snapping into sections, the main problem may be damage to the hair shaft. In that case, taking vitamins alone may not solve it, because the outside part of the hair has already been physically and chemically damaged. What is usually needed is reducing heat, reducing strong chemical treatments, detangling more gently, protecting the remaining hair, cutting off severely damaged parts if necessary, and waiting for new hair to grow. On the other hand, if full strands are shedding from the scalp, the hair is gradually thinning, the part line is widening or clear thin areas appear. The story may involve the follicles, the hair cycle, hormones, genetics, or internal health. In both cases, there is less hair, but the path leading to it is different. Tying hair too tightly for a long time can also create problems. When hair is pulled continuously, especially around the hairline, temples, or areas under repeated tension, the follicles can experience repeated pulling stress. This can lead to traction alopecia, or hair loss caused by tension. At first, if the pulling is reduced early, the hair may improve. But if tight pulling continues for many years and causes long-term damage to the follicles, recovery may become more difficult. This is a very practical example showing that hair is affected not only from the inside, but also by outside habits. A hairstyle may look beautiful, but if it causes scalp pain every day, it is not harmless. Pain is a signal from the body asking us to pay attention. Poor sleep and long-term stress do not only affect mood, they affect the whole body. Stress hormones, immunity, metabolism, eating habits, recovery, and levels of inflammation. Hair can be indirectly affected in that context. We should not say that one good night of sleep will make hair grow back immediately. Hair does not respond that quickly. But sleep is part of the foundation of health. A body that rests better, eats more consistently, and carries less stress creates a more favourable environment for the skin, hair follicles, and many other tissues to work normally. Hair needs time. The body needs a foundation. No single trick can replace that foundation. And we also need to speak honestly about miracle promises. Not every expensive product makes hair grow faster. Not every oil can wake up follicles that have lost function. Not every vitamin makes hair thicker if the body is not deficient in that nutrient. Some products can make the hair shaft feel softer, reduce friction, make hair easier to comb, hold moisture better, or improve the feel of the surface. Some medications for hair loss have been studied and can be useful for certain types of hair loss, but every product needs to be understood according to its true goal. Making the hair shaft look smoother is not the same as making follicles grow more hair. Reducing breakage is not the same as treating hereditary hair loss. Cleansing the scalp is not the same as changing hormones. Good science begins by naming the problem correctly. A person with dry ends may need to reduce heat and protect the hair shaft more. A person with an oily, itchy, flaky scalp may need to address a scalp issue. A person with diffuse shedding after a major event may need time and an investigation of the underlying cause. A person with a gradually receding hairline that follows a family pattern may need advice about hereditary hair loss. A person with round patches of hair loss may need to be checked for an autoimmune condition such as alopecia areata. A person with pain, redness, scarring, or heavy scaling needs earlier attention. Each case is a different story. If we use the same advice for everyone, we can easily get it wrong. There are signs that should be discussed with a dermatologist or healthcare professional. If hair shedding lasts for many months without improvement, falls out in patches, thins quickly, clearly changes the hairline, or comes with scalp pain, intense itching, redness, inflammation, thick flaking, pus-filled bumps, or if hair loss comes with fatigue, unexplained weight loss, menstrual changes, or changes in the skin and nails, then it is not wise to rely only on home hair care tips. The body may need to be checked. This is not meant to scare the listener. On the contrary, it helps us feel calmer because we know when to observe, when to change habits, and when to seek professional help. Hair can also reflect aging in a very natural way. As the years pass, hair may become greyer, finer, drier, slower growing, or less dense in some areas. This is not always a disease. The human body changes with age. Hair follicles do too. But because hair is easy to see, changes in hair often touch our emotions more strongly than many other changes. A person may not notice their bones changing, their hormones shifting, or their skin becoming thinner, but they immediately notice a few grey strands or a wide apart line. Hair becomes a place where time appears before our eyes. Science does not take away that emotion. Science helps us understand that many changes are part of biological life, not a sign that the body has failed. Let us return to the story of a person who has gone through a stressful season. A few months later, that person wakes up and sees more hair on the pillow. In the shower, hair gathers near the drain. On the comb, strands collect in small groups. The first feeling is often fear, but if a scientist were sitting nearby, they probably would not say something certain right away. They would ask gently, what did the body go through a few months ago? Was there a fever? Was there surgery? Was there major weight loss? Was there a medication change? Was there childbirth? Was there long-term sleep deprivation? Was there too little food? Was the scalp painful or inflamed? Each question is like opening a small door. When the right doors are opened, vague fear begins to become a picture that can be understood. Hair is a slow letter, but not every letter carries bad news. Sometimes hair sheds more for a while, and then gradually stabilizes. Sometimes breakage reminds us that we have used too much heat. Sometimes an itchy scalp reminds us to look again at a product or a possible skin inflammation. Sometimes gradual thinning reminds us to check genetics, hormones, or overall health. Sometimes a grey strand reminds us that time has passed. Each signal has its own value, as long as we do not read it with panic, and also do not ignore it with indifference. Caring for hair, then, is not about chasing every advertisement. Caring for hair means caring for an entire system: the hair shaft, the scalp, the hair follicle, and the body. For the hair shaft, we reduce friction, avoid excessive heat, limit harsh chemicals, and detangle gently, especially when the hair is wet or already weak. For the scalp, we keep it properly clean, avoid scratching too hard, and pay attention to flaking, itching, pain, or inflammation. For the follicles, we respect their cycle, eat enough, rest better, treat underlying illness if present, and seek advice when hair loss is unusual. For the body, we remember that hair does not grow in isolation. Hair grows on a living person who is eating, sleeping, worrying, recovering, aging, and adapting. There is a deep kind of peace in this way of seeing. When we understand hair through science, we no longer need to hate every fallen strand. We also do not need to believe every promise that one product can change everything. We can become more patient. Hair grows slowly. Hair follicles have cycles. A damaged hair shaft needs time to be replaced by new hair. The body after a major event also needs time to return to balance. Proper care is not always loud. Sometimes it is tying the hair more loosely. It is lowering the heat on the blow dryer. It is eating more consistently. It is getting checked when hair shedding lasts too long. It is going to sleep a little earlier. It is stopping the pulling, stopping the rubbing, and stopping too many experiments at once. It is giving the body a chance to work at its own rhythm. Hair is not just something that grows on the head. Hair is a quiet biological forest, where the body can leave traces of age, hormones, nutrition, stress, sleep, illness, medication, care habits, and the environment. But that forest should not be seen with fear. It should be seen with accurate and gentle observation. A fallen strand may simply be a leaf that has reached the end of its season. A broken hair shaft may be a sign of friction and heat. A painful area of scalp may be a reminder to seek medical care. Hair gradually turning grey may be time writing itself onto the body. And in all of this, science does not make the story cold. Science makes it clearer, more real, and sometimes more gentle. Once we understand that hair can reflect part of the body's health, we can look even wider. Hair is not only a biological material growing from hair follicles. Hair is also part of human history, part of the sense of touch, part of the way the face expresses emotion, and part of personal memory. A single strand of hair can be analysed through keratin, melanin, hair follicles, sebaceous glands, and the growth cycle. But when that strand sits on the head of a living human being, it enters a larger story. It is connected to evolution, climate, sunlight, social communication, age, family, change, and identity. Modern humans have much less thick body hair than many other primates. We do not have a full coat of hair like chimpanzees, gorillas, or many other mammals. But that does not mean the human body is completely naked. The skin still has a great many hair follicles, most of which create very small, soft, hard-to-see, vellus hairs. This is part of what makes humans special. We lost much of the thick hair covering the body, but we kept different forms of hair in places with specific functions. Scalp hair can still grow long. Eyebrows have a role near the eyes. Eyelashes protect the eyelid margins. Nose hairs help filter larger particles in the air. Body hair, even when small, can still take part in the sense of touch. In other words, evolution did not erase hair from the human body. It kept it, reduced it, changed it, and distributed it in new ways. One of the most interesting questions is why humans kept long scalp hair, while most body hair became thinner and finer. Evolutionary hypotheses suggest that when human ancestors lived in hot environments and moved on two legs under the sun, reducing body hair may have helped the body release heat more effectively through sweat. But the head is a special area. When we walk upright, the top of the head receives a lot of direct sunlight. The brain is very sensitive to heat. Scalp hair may help reduce the amount of heat and ultraviolet radiation that directly reaches the scalp. Some recent studies also suggest that scalp hair, especially hair with a certain degree of curl, may reduce solar heat reaching the head while still allowing the body to cool itself. So scalp hair is not only about beauty. It may once have been part of a survival problem, how to protect the head while the body still needed to cool down. Scalp hair can also act as a natural covering against sunlight. The level of protection depends on hair thickness, hair density, hair colour, hairstyle, and whether the scalp is exposed. Thick hair can create better shade for the scalp than very sparse hair. Dark hair absorbs light differently from light-coloured hair. Curly hair creates space and coverage differently from straight hair that lies close to the scalp. But this should not be understood as advice that hair can fully replace a hat or sunscreen for exposed areas of the scalp. If the scalp is bald, the hair is thinning, the part is wide, or there is long exposure to sunlight, protection with a hat, shade, and other safety measures is still very important. Science does not say hair is an absolute shield. It says hair can contribute to protection, within its limits. Eyebrows are also a small but very practical example of the function of hair. Eyebrows sit above the eyes and grow in a direction and shape that help move sweat, rainwater, or dust away from the eye area. They are not only decorative lines on the face. When we sweat, the curved shape of the eyebrows and the brow area can help liquid flow to the sides instead of straight into the eyes. Eyebrows also play a strong role in expression. With only a slight lift, a frown, a pull inward, or a relaxed position, eyebrows can help the face communicate surprise, doubt, worry, anger, or gentleness. A few small hairs on the face therefore have both a biological role and a communication role. Eyelashes protect the eyes in another way. Eyelashes can help reduce small dust particles, wind, and irritants coming close to the eyes. When something touches the eyelashes, the eyes may blink reflexively to protect the cornea. Here, eyelashes are like soft sensors at the edge of the eyes. They do not need to be endlessly long. They only need to be long enough, sensitive enough, and placed correctly enough to warn the eyes when something comes too close. If we think about how many times the eyes blink in a day, and how many times dust, wind, moisture, light, and movement pass across the face, we can see that these tiny eyelashes are doing a very quiet job. We do not notice them when everything is normal, but that normalness itself is a sign that they are helping protect us. Body hair is also connected to the sense of light touch. A small hair on the arm can be moved by wind, brushed by clothing, or crossed by a very tiny insect. The hair shaft does not have nerves running through it, but the follicle and the surrounding skin have sensory nerve endings. When the hair moves, force is transferred down to the skin, and the nervous system can detect that very slight change. This is a subtle function of body hair. It is not only for keeping warm, as it is in many animals with thick fur. In humans, body hair can also extend the skin's sensitivity to the environment. A tiny hair becomes a fine lever that helps the skin sense the world before an object touches the skin surface directly. Goosebumps are another trace of our evolutionary past. When we are cold or emotionally moved, the tiny erector pili muscles attached to hair follicles can contract, making the hairs stand up. In animals with thick fur, this reaction helps the fur puff up, trap more air, and support heat retention. It can also make the body look larger when danger appears. In humans, because body hair is no longer that thick, the warming or threatening effect is not very strong, but the reflex still exists. When a song gives us chills, when we remember a touching story, or when we step into cold air, the skin may rise into goosebumps. In that moment, the body seems to reveal an ancient line connecting present emotion with a very old biological reflex system. Scalp hair has another different feature. It can grow much longer than eyebrows, eyelashes, or most body hair. This is connected to the long growth cycle of hair follicles on the scalp. Scalp hair can stay in the growth phase for many years, so if it is not cut or broken, it can grow to a significant length. That ability to grow long has created a large space for expression in human life. Hair can be worn down, tied, braided, cut short, shaved, covered, dyed, curled, straightened, kept natural, or turned into a sign of a stage in life. A small biological difference in the hair follicle cycle has opened an entire cultural space. If scalp hair grew only as short as eyebrows, the history of clothing, rituals, occupations, gender, age, and identity might have been very different. Hair is a very strong social signal, even when we do not always realize it. In the first few seconds of seeing a face, we may notice an estimated age, style, state of grooming, and even part of that person's mood or life stage through their hair. Grey hair can suggest experience. A very short haircut can suggest neatness, change, or decisiveness. Long hair that is carefully cared for can suggest patience. Messy hair after a sleepless night may say that the body has just gone through a tiring day. Of course, these signals should never be used to judge a whole person, but they show that hair sits at the boundary between biology and social communication. It is something the body creates, but society reads it. In many cultures, hair has carried symbolic meaning and still does. In some places, long hair is connected with strength, maturity, or beauty. In some places, shaving the head is connected with spiritual practice, discipline, mourning, a new beginning, or leaving behind an old life. In some places, hair is covered for reasons of religion, modesty, tradition, or community identity. In some places, hairstyle expresses occupation, status, age, marital status, or belonging to a group. These meanings are not the same around the world, and they change over time, but the shared point is that hair easily becomes symbolic because it belongs to the body, yet it can also be changed. It is part of us, but it is also something we can arrange to say something to the world. Cutting hair sometimes marks a new chapter in life. After a loss, a breakup, a job change, a period of illness, or a time when someone wants to begin again, many people choose to cut their hair. Biologically, the scissors only shorten the hair shaft that has already grown outside the body. They do not immediately change memory, erase stress, or turn the body into a different person. But psychologically, that act can carry meaning. It changes the image in the mirror. It creates the feeling that an old section has been set down. It allows a person to see themselves with a new outline. Hair, therefore, becomes a place where humans use biology to create personal rituals. A keratin strand has no nerves inside it, but when it is cut at the right moment, it can touch very deep emotions. Hair shedding, grey hair, thinning hair, or changes in texture can also affect emotion strongly. This is not shallow at all. Hair is connected to self-image, age, health, gender, family memory, and the way other people see us. When someone sees heavy shedding after an illness, they may feel that their body is more fragile. When someone sees a parent's grey hair, they may suddenly realise that time is no longer a distant idea. When someone loses hair because of medical treatment, they may feel as if part of their outer identity has been taken away, even though their inner strength remains. So speaking about hair only through chemistry is not enough. Hair is keratin, but it is also the feeling of recognising yourself in the mirror. Imagine someone keeping a small lock of hair from their child when the child was very young. That lock of hair may sit inside an envelope, a wooden box, or between pages of memory. Scientifically, it is a bundle of keratinized fibres containing melanin and carrying traces of hair follicles from an early stage of life. But to the person keeping it, that lock of hair is the first morning, the scent of a small child's skin, the laughter in the room, and time that cannot return. The same object holds two layers of meaning at once. Science does not deny memory. Science only tells us how that object was made. Human beings give it meaning through love and time. Imagine another person looking at the grey hair of their father or mother under the kitchen light. Maybe many years ago that hair was darker. It once bent down to tie a child's shoes, leaned under sunlight in the yard and quietly worked through many seasons. Now, silver strands lie among the strands that still hold colour. From a biological point of view, this is the gradual reduction of melanin production inside the hair follicles. From the point of view of life, it is time appearing on someone we love. A grey strand can be very small, but it has the power to make us realise that every body is moving through seasons, and that realisation often comes very quietly, without noise, without needing much explanation. Hair can also be connected to work and everyday life. A doctor, a teacher, an artist, a gardener, a mechanic, someone working in a kitchen, or a retired person walking every morning all have hair affected by different living environments. Some people need to tie their hair neatly for safety at work. Some wear hats for many hours. Some are exposed to sunlight, wind, dust, seawater, swimming pools, dry air conditioning or high heat. Some do not use chemicals, some dye their hair for many years. Hair therefore does not only record internal biology, it also records part of an external lifestyle. It sits where the body directly meets the world. Hair also has a special role in facial recognition. Eyebrows make expressions clearer. The hairline frames the face. A hairstyle can change the sense of age and personality. When someone changes their hairstyle dramatically, we may need a second to recognize them. This shows that the brain uses hair as part of remembering other people. We do not only remember eyes, noses and mouths. We also remember the hair color, part line, length, and the way hair falls around the face. A small part made of keratin becomes part of the recognition map in another person's memory. So hair is biological tissue, visual signal, and social symbol at the same time. From an evolutionary point of view, the diversity of human hair is also very striking. Humans have many hair colors, many hair shapes, many levels of thickness, many growth patterns, and many patterns of change. This diversity is connected to genetics, migration history, environment, natural selection, sexual selection, and random variation within populations. But we should avoid explaining things too simply, as if one hair type belongs only to one group of people, or one hair color has only one cause. Human biology is always more complex than labels. Hair is the product of a very long history, where many genetic lines met, adapted, changed, and continued to pass through generations. A head of hair today may carry very distant traces of ancestry. Hair is also where we see the difference between the individual and the species. As a species, humans share common features. Hair grows from follicles, is made of keratin, has a cycle, contains melanin, is connected to sebaceous glands, and has erector pili muscles. But as individuals, no one's hair is exactly the same as anyone else's. One person goes grey earlier, another has curlier hair, someone has fine strands but high density, someone else has thick strands but dry hair. Some people's hair changes colour as they grow up. Some people lose hair after illness and then grow it back. Some keep almost the same hairstyle their whole life. Some change their hair every time they enter a new stage. Hair is therefore a place where the shared biology of the species meets the private life of the individual. One very gentle thing is that hair helps us realise the body does not live only in the present. It also carries time. The ends of long hair may have appeared many months or many years ago. They have gone with us through winter, summer, nights of sleep, walks, stressful moments, and periods of recovery. The newly grown hair near the roots belongs to a more recent time. Within the same strand, time lies along its length. Near the scalp is the biological present. At the ends is the grown-out past. This makes hair a kind of physical journal. Not a journal written in words, but one written in protein, pigment, damage, length, and colour. In forensic science, hair can provide certain information, but we also need to understand its limits. Hair can be used in some analyses, such as looking at chemicals that have accumulated in the hair shaft over time, or supporting identification in certain contexts. However, hair is not all-powerful evidence. A fallen strand does not always contain enough genetic material from the cell nucleus if it does not have the right root tissue attached. Hair analysis requires careful methods, and should not be understood the way it is often shown in movies where one strand of hair solves every mystery. This reminds us again of the spirit of science. Hair can say many things, but it does not say everything. It is a clue, not the entire truth. Hair has also travelled with medicine and the history of illness. A person going through chemotherapy may lose hair because the medication affects rapidly dividing cells, including hair-producing cells. For many people, losing hair during treatment is not only a physical side effect, it is a powerful touch to identity. Some people choose to wear wigs, some choose scarves, some shave their heads before the hair falls out heavily. Some keep a few strands as a way to remember a period of fighting. From the outside, it may look like only hair, but to the person living through it, it is the image in the mirror, the sense of control, privacy, and the story of a body being treated. Science needs to be accurate, but it also needs to be compassionate when speaking about hair. On the other side, hair can be a very small joy. Someone recovering from illness may notice baby hairs growing again along the forehead. Someone after a period of temporary hair shedding may see short strands standing up under the light. An older person may look at their grey hair and feel that it belongs to a face that has lived through many years. A young person may try a new hairstyle and feel braver. All these moments show that hair can affect the mind in both directions. It can make us worry, but it can also bring relief. It can remind us of time, but it can also mark recovery. If we look very slowly, hair is one of the closest things to human life. We touch it while thinking. We smooth it when we are tired. We tie it back when we need to focus. We untangle it after waking up. We see hair on pillows, on clothing, and in the sink. We take hair to a salon, ask another person to touch it, change it, and arrange it. Hair is a part of the body that others can see every day, but it is also a part we can feel in a very private way. Perhaps that is why, when hair changes, we do not only see a biological change, we see a change in the way we appear in the world. Hair is not just something that grows on the head. Hair is a quiet biological forest, recording age, genetics, hormones, health, environment, memory, and the social life of human beings. At the deepest layer, it is follicles, keratin, melanin, and the growth cycle. At the wider layer, it is evolution, protection for the scalp, protection for the eyes, the sense of touch, and the goosebump reflex. At the layer closer to the heart, it is the child's lock of hair kept in a box, the grey hair of parents, the haircut after a chapter of life, and the feeling of looking in the mirror and realizing that you are still changing. The science of hair is therefore not cold. It does not take away the warmth of memory. On the contrary, it helps us see that memory has a beautiful material foundation. A small lock of a child's hair was created by hair follicles working actively in the early years of life. A grey strand from an older person is the result of pigment decreasing inside the follicle over time. A wave of goosebumps when hearing an old song is the activity of the erector pili muscles and the nervous system. An eyelash touched by dust that makes the eye blink is a protective reflex. A head of hair that helps shade the scalp in some measure is the result of a long evolutionary history. Very human things can be explained through biology, and when they are explained well, they do not lose their wonder. They become even more wondrous. Maybe tonight, when we think about hair, we will not only think about whether it is beautiful or unattractive, thick or thin, grey or black, straight or curly. We may think about a longer line of history, from ancestors walking under the sun, to hair follicles beneath the scalp, to eyebrows keeping sweat away from the eyes, to eyelashes blinking gently against dust, to the first grey strand under the bathroom light, to the small lock of hair kept in an old box. All of it is hair, but hair at many different layers of meaning. And when something so small can connect biology with evolution, the body with memory, sensation with identity, then it is no longer ordinary. It is a very fine part of human life, but it holds an astonishing depth. And so, on this very quiet journey, we have travelled through a small but remarkable world, the world of human hair. From a thin strand of hair on a comb, we have seen an entire biological system working beneath the scalp, where hair follicles create new strands, where keratin builds a strong structure, where melanin paints colour, and where hormones, nutrition, age, stress, and sleep can leave very subtle signs. You have learned that hair is not just appearance. Hair has its own life cycle. It grows, moves through the growth phase, shifts into rest, and then leaves the scalp when its cycle is complete. A few strands of hair falling out each day are not necessarily something frightening. Sometimes, that is simply the way the body renews itself in silence. But you have also learned that when hair shedding lasts for a long time, appears in patches, comes with scalp pain, itching, inflammation, or clearly visible thinning, that is when we should listen to the body more carefully and seek an appropriate medical evaluation. You have also seen that hair colour is not random. It is the story of melanin, genetics, light, and time. Black, brown, blond, red, grey, or white hair are all different ways the hair follicle expresses its activity. A grey strand is not a failure of the body. It is a very natural biological sign, showing that time has gently passed through us. And in the end, hair is also memory. It is the small lock of hair from a child. It is the grey hair of our parents. It is the haircut that begins a new chapter. It is a very personal part of the way each person recognises themselves in the mirror. Thank you for joining Sleep by Knowledge on this quiet journey through the biological forest of hair. Now relax your forehead, relax your shoulders, and let your breathing slow down. I wish you a truly good, deep, and peaceful sleep. I will see you again in the next gentle scientific journey.